T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. Welcome to the Trap Talk Reptile Network, the coolest reptile network in the world. Here we have episode 31 of All Monitor Talk. I am your host, Jim Black of SOAR Magazine, and with me is my partner in crime, Mike Stefani of Mike's Monitors. Hi, my dude.
Hey, how you doing, Jen? I'm so glad to have you back. You're looking hot as always.
Thank you.
I hope you're on the upswing to your issues that you've been having. So appreciate you being back.
Yes, I missed you guys very, very much. And today, what we got going on here? Let's tell us about USARK.
Okay, well, as always, for all of us who love these animals and nurture them and really take it seriously, join the USARK. You could get on a $5 a month or whatever it is, a $5 join-up fee, all the way up to, like a platinum membership. When you're at the shows, if you could donate product or animal or your time, they can use the help at the shows. Phil Goss and Vanessa, Jeremy over there at USARK, they work tirelessly to fight for our rights to keep these animals because, these shady legislatures come at us in the middle of the night trying to take our animals away from us. And it's wrong for the animals and it's wrong for us. Join USARK today.
All right. Anybody knows that Blake's Exotic Feeders has the best quail on the market. Various sizes, high quality quail for all of your reptile needs. Hit up Blake Exotics for feeders.
So wait, okay. Before we get into it, I got a little shout out here for Andrew. How you doing, Andrew? Uncle Mike here. I just wanted to say, I was going to say something, but I messed it up. But how you doing, Andrew? Glad you watch.
Yes, dear. Hello, Andrew. And today, who do we have here? None other than Dr. Robert Sprackland. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, absolutely, right, Robert.
Been very busy and looking forward to
this. We go. I mean, I've never shaken your hand, but I've been following your work since I was, very young, and appreciate you accepting the invitation to come on. I have so much to talk to you about, and so thank you for joining us, sir.
Well, I was only a little hesitant when you said this was going to be 5 hours, but let's go if that's what you want.
Well,
it's for people like you that I do what I do, because when I started doing my work, I was going very much into just looking at it from the scientific standpoint of evolutionary mechanisms. And then I came out with my first 2 books, and I had so much of a response saying to people that either I didn't know the information was out there, or I'm glad somebody has found new information. And I've been going ever since. So thank you for reading and following. That's terrific.
Well, again, it takes a special skill to put all your work together on pages for laymen and academics alike to read and understand. So we appreciate your hard work, and we could get into this podcast now.
Yeah, we can. And for those of you, which are probably going to be very, very few, who do not know who Robert Sprackland is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you even got into Varanids in the first place?
When I was very young, just about when the dinosaurs went extinct, I was working as a volunteer at the American Museum of Natural History in New York. And I was very fortunate, amongst other things, to have Charles Bogart let me come in as a volunteer and to work with the collection so I could learn things. But I was very fortunate in getting a fellow named Samuel McDowell to kind of take me under his wing. And he was interested in seeing what somebody that young was doing, wanted to do. And so he started showing me things. And it led from one thing to another. He's the one that suggested I publish my first book, All About Lizards, which was kind of just a short introduction to the different families and the variation of lizards and a little bit about the anatomy. But, just to familiarize yourself with this humongous group of animals. And then one day he came in and I was looking at some kind of an agamid lizard. I was counting the snails. I was looking at the difference in the scales on the snout between this one and another species that looked just like it. And he comes in and he says, so, with his pipe, and he leans over me and he says, so, you ever see the nostrils in monitor lizards? And at that point, I'd seen them. I had never thought about them.
Right.
Yeah. But you notice how different they are from species to species. And I said, not entirely. He says, well, he described a few of them. And he says, why do you think that is? I said, I don't know. I've never thought about it. Why is that? And he starts sucking on his pipe and he said, well, I don't know either. It'd be a good subject to study. And then he walks away. So mind you, I'm 17 at this point. Yes, that's my boy, Bjorn.
Hi.
Hurry up, Cherry. Take me out.
Sorry for that. But
Okay.
Bjorn is my manager. He takes care of the schedule around here. So anyway, Sam left me with that question. And, 2 years later, I went off to university and I studied at the University of Kansas with some, really good herpetology people. I went there because at the time it was the best herp school around. And as time went on, even before I finished there, I started looking more and more into monitor lizards. And then I started the hard way. I bought a pair of Bengal monitors when I was a sophomore. Back then, Bengal monitors, now CITES Appendix 1, right? It was the last time either of you have seen one in somebody's collection. I bought a pair of them. I named them Rodan and Sudan.
Nice, Rodan.
They were terrific. They were very accommodating, very pets. They'd sit on my lap and everything. And I paid $12.50 for each of them.
Crazy.
Oh,
Crazy.
Those were my first monitors. And I just became more and more fascinated. They were smart. Something I said before, Jen and Mike, that I want to talk to you about. I've studied a bit about how intelligent monitors are by giving them different kind of tests. But as far as getting them to be tractable, I don't know if I'll say tame, but to be responsive, especially responsive to their names.
Yeah. I don't like using the word tame, but tractable is what I like to use. We build a relation with them,
Yeah.
Trusting relation.
Yeah, I like that. That's the same kind of thing that Tom Crutchfield says. You have to build the relationship, and so I haven't gotten too much of that. That's something I want to learn from you folks. But that got me interested, and then from there, it was just a case of being exposed to more monitors. When I got my own place after college, I started to keep some monitors. This is so way back. When I started, my first monitors, I had my pair of Bengals. Okay, I had a Varanus flavirufus.
Nice.
Okay.
Rudy.
I had a pair of green tree monitors, Prasinus, and I had a Dumarils monitor. In fact, when we were getting married, I bought my wife a nice ring. I like gems, but as you can see, I don't wear jewelry. So I buy jewelry that she can wear. And I bought her a nice ring with a nice jewel that was nice to look at. And she said, what would you like? And it turns out at that point, it had access to the first Dumarils monitor alive that was being imported. I said, that's what I want. And so if you go look way back in my publications, my first publications had some local critters, and it had Lanthanotus, and the first monitor I wrote about in 1976 was Varanus dumarilii. So, and as you folks probably know, once you get the monitor bug, it don't go away.
It doesn't.
If you're a true,
all the time,
if you're a true monitor guy, whether you've had them in the past or not, when you get bit by that monitor bug, you're done. You're done.
It's true. It's true. I just want to make a quick shout out to Lucid Arboreals, who's joined us. Eric's More Factory has joined us. West Coast Reptiles, Adrian, hello. JMG Reptiles.
Hey.
And our very own Brad's Bioactive Build, who gave us a super chat. Thank you so much, Brad.
Thank you, brother.
So, yes, the monitor bug. And I guess all three of us can agree that the monitor bug is because of the relationships we could form with these animals. Time and time again, they keep surprising us with more and more behaviors from a naturalistic standpoint, for people who watch them at the wild, and we know certain body language from studies done for years. And then there's these other brand new behaviors that have to do with socialization and working with these animals as constantly as we do.
And like with what you're saying there is, I say this a lot, but it is true. These animals are highly intelligent, and if you understand their behaviors and their body language, you can read what they're saying to you. We're not communicating like we're doing here. However, they are communicating to us. If you know what you're looking at, you can answer those questions and make your animals very happy. They're not dumb. I'm not saying they say, hey, go make me a peanut butter sandwich. I'm not saying nothing like that. But however, if you see them basking for hours on end, your basking temperatures are too low. You need to get them up, because in the wild, when they're basking, they're vulnerable. So they want to heat up as fast as they can and then get back into safety. So, they'll teach you things if you listen to what they're saying to you.
Definitely.
I think that's true for all animals. I mean, when my first service dog back in 1998, beautiful shepherd mix, and at that point I was your standard trained zoologist that animals aren't really intelligent, they mimic behaviors, blah blah blah. His name was King, and by the end of the first 6 months together, he was teaching me things, and I fully acknowledged this guy is smart.
Absolutely.
And from one thing, and at that particular time in my life, I was living in California. I was in the San Francisco area, and I got to do some work with octopuses. And the things that I saw the octopuses do.
Yeah.
Not only did they learn, but on a repeated trial, they could do something in less than a third of the time, less than a quarter of the time. And then he brought an octopus in that hadn't seen them do it at all, and then just watched them. It picked it up in less than half the time it took the originals to do it. I mean, animals are smart, and we just have to stop being afraid to say that. It was a thing. It was almost like scientific suicide. Said, "Oh, animals are smart and they're thinking, and they can know their names, and they know what to do, and they can respond to what you're doing." Now it's not a question of is that true. A lot of people still are on that side of it, but the question is how do we evaluate it? How do we qualify it? How do we quantify it? Think about how smart monitors now. Green tree monitor, snout vent length, about like this, maybe 18 inches, 20 in a big one, and this is what I'm working on for my book. I have a green tree monitor here, and I don't think you'll see. What is in here is the
eye.
brain.
The brain.
Monitor. That's the brain of an adult. Can you see that? Is that clear?
Oh, yeah. Now I'm jealous because that looks twice the size of mine.
You want me to get for you? But that little bit of a brain, and then you figure that less than a fifth of that represents the equivalent of what we call the thinking brain. Yep. Most of it is like the thermostat and the furnace and the light bulbs and the sleep cycle. But
I think
it's
freezing up.
Any bit of that.
Sorry, guys, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty.
That I was talking about.
We're going to have him jump out.
Yeah. Robert, you froze for a little bit. If you could just repeat. Do you want? You know what?
Yeah, jump out, come back in.
Come back in.
So, Jen,
here I go. Where's my?
Yeah, just sign out, and then we'll bring you back in. And at during this time, I also want to say hello to Mother of Reptiles, who's joined us as well. We also have Amy's Reptile Adventure. Girl, I missed you. I'm so happy you're here.
Hi, Amy.
So I think I got everybody so far, and here he is.
Okay.
Hey, there he is. Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so you were saying about the level of brain capacity that they use for this or that.
Right. But what I showed you, that little bit of a brain, which is smaller than the tip of my finger, about a third the size of the tip of my finger. And then maybe a fifth of that is the part that responds, as I've seen, to their name. It's the part that responds to learning a puzzle, which is something I have done with monitors. And I've seen some other people with videos of doing that. And it's that part of the brain that tells the monitor that this is where the food is. If I'm in captivity, it's in this part of my dish, or on this particular day, or it's in that particular room. They learn that. They remember that. And I'm talking to the choir here. But for people who aren't familiar with monitors, and they're not alone in being smart, it's just that they are animals that we have thought of being smart for a long time. And now we're seeing more and more people demonstrating that they are.
And I think that's the appeal. That's the appeal. That's why people...
That is the appeal, I believe, yes.
Yes, like people see these videos where you see a tree monitor using its thin little fingers to get treats out of like those rubber toys for dogs
And
or out of the puzzle things, and people are like, wow, there's a lizard that actually could do that. And then you still have the people who be like, it's just because you like the reptile that you're seeing these type of behaviors. These behaviors are not real. It's just the way you're perceiving it.
Well, for people like that, this is pretty much what happened to me with monitor lizards. Coming from a snake background, I'm more of a colubrid type guy because I like these animals that have high metabolisms and they move around a lot. They don't just eat and sit in the corner and turn off for 7 days. I like these highly active animals, which are basically, in my opinion, monitors without arms and legs. So from there, if you take a monitor lizard, anyone who's curious about monitor lizards and what the attraction is, if you're ever at a zoo or a pet shop or wherever you happen to see a monitor lizard, go to the cage and look directly at that animal. And you're looking directly at him, but let your mind go a little bit and try to understand what that monitor lizard is doing. Well, he's looking back at you with the same kind of curiosity as you're looking at him with. And that was a huge draw for me into these animals, to think, wow, this thing is looking at me, trying to figure me out. It's just that, it's not a human. It's not an octopus like you were saying earlier. It's a reptilian, and constantly thinking and assessing your face, your movements. If you raise an eyebrow, they'll turn their head. So they really trying to figure us out.
Yeah, it's the curiosity. And that's, I think, from the natural world as well. They have to look at everything in their environment. It's a life or death situation. So they have to take everything in. They have to like analyze, is this friend? Is this foe? Is it food? Is it going to, be someplace where I'm going to rest or whatever? So all that takes, has to come into the equation with these guys.
Think of some of the differences that you can see in lizards, fairly large sized lizards. Like in Australia, there were, these different tree dragons. They get to be a fair size. And the Physignathus, what is it now, and Telegamma, beautiful, large, iguana-like creatures. And if I'm wandering around in the bush, or I'm sitting down having a snack or lunch or something, and I'm within a certain distance, they're gone. They either freeze and hide, or they're gone. But with the Gould's monitors, the lace monitors, and the Panoptes, what's the common name for Panoptes?
There's so many different. That's why I don't like common names. But yellow spotted, varanid, sand goanna. I mean, there's a lot of names for them. But
there we go. Well, with all three of these species, I have sat down on the trail either to have lunch or to get a drink of water, do something. I'm sitting down, putting stuff in my notebook, and they don't run away. I didn't even know they're there. And all of a sudden, there's this lizard coming out of the field of vision, coming towards me, flicking its tongue, looking at me. I could almost hear it thinking, what is that thing? Why is it in my territory? Wait a minute, is that food? Is that food? I got to get closer and check, because that might be food. And we've seen the videos from different nature shows over the years where they would come up to people in parks and they'd be given pieces of sausages or shrimp off the Barbie. The very first time I took Terry into the field in Australia, my wife, I went to go do something, to run an errand, bring more stuff up from the dock, which is about 2 miles away. She's up at this Rangers building that we were given to live in. She's there alone, and it's this nice big spotted Panoptes monitor comes to the house, and she's thinking, "Oh God, Robert's going out there. He wants to find monitors. We've been here for a few minutes, and here's this big knocking monitor sitting in the backyard. How do I keep it here till he comes back?" So, thinking quickly, she runs into the house. She opens a can of tuna fish, puts it on a plate, goes outside, pushes it towards the lizard. And then I'm coming back up the hill. She runs around the side of the building so as not to scare Lucy. She says, Robert, there's a big monitor. Where? She brings me out. The thing is still eating. And then we get into the yard, and we're walking around. I've got my camera with me, and I'm taking pictures. And wherever I go, it's following us. It's walking around us, keeping a circle, keeping a distance. Now, you tell me of a skink that will do that.
Yeah.
Except in a park, a squirrel that will do that, or any other creature that's in roughly that size range. That thing is curious.
Oh, yeah.
And it's learned that we can provide food. So it's curious. It knows that we can provide food, and it's deciding to stick around to see if we have more. That's a lot of brain power for something with that tiny.
Absolutely. And just to show you a little bit about their brain capacity, like we're talking about, he'll be curious to look at you. You know you're gonna, you are a food source. However, they're not dumb to where they're gonna let you get into distance to catch them, because they know, especially if you happen to use your eyes to look at them and observe them, they know exactly how close you can get before they have to run. They're like we're talking about. They're not dumb animals. They're very curious. However, they still have self-preservation in their repertoire, and they're not going to let you catch them. So unless you're very fast or ingenious with a pole, you're not catching them.
No.
The very first one I saw in the field was a Gould's monitor out in the bush, out in the desert, and it was laying across this dead tree of some sort. I wasn't paying attention to the tree. It was the first monitor I saw on the field, and I was taking pictures. And I take a step, I get closer, and take a picture, and step in at about a meter at a time. And I'm finally really close to it, and I'm just curious. I am within range that I could reach down and touch its tail, because it's facing at an angle. And I just slowly start to go for the tail. And I'm at that point, I'm 2-3 inches from it, and it's gone.
It's gone.
It knew something. And I had that experience with a few others. But the first one, you always remember your first, right?
Yeah.
And I swear, on that particular day, I was convinced that a monitor could fly if it wanted to.
Yeah.
It could defy gravity.
Yep.
So,
sure did. The person who was with me, who had never done herpetology before, came along to wanted to see what I was so interested in. I think he flew backwards.
Yeah.
I know he did the first time he saw a tiger snake coming at him. We were at one of the zoos, and they had a baby tiger snake, and I wanted to photograph it. I'd never seen one. Put him on a linoleum floor, and the snake is sitting there. And I take my pictures. Then all of a sudden, my friend comes over. He wants to look closer. And as soon as he starts moving the range, the snake starts, which on linoleum doesn't do much good. But this poor guy, I think he flew backwards. So he was on top of the flat freezer that they had in the back of the room. So different things can fly with the right motivation.
Yeah, sure. I know I can. Just put a stake within, minimal distance.
So when I was a little kid, to talk about how intelligent, now I'm going to, I'm in the United States. So we were on vacation. I was a little kid, and being a little reptile guy, I always want to catch anoles, toads, whatever the case may be. So me running around like an idiot, trying to catch anoles off of rocks and trees, they make you look like idiots, right? So what I had done, I was sitting on a rock eating my lunch, and my peripheral vision, I seen something come up on a rock near me, and I was like, wow, I've never seen one come that close. So instead of turning my head, I was kind of looking at it through my peripheral view, and he was studying me. This is a Carolina anole, and it was studying me. And I was like, wow, I can't believe that thing is so close. And when I turned and looked at him, as soon as my head squared off with his body and my eyes were on him, he's gone. So I quickly learned that you could get close enough if you don't directly look at them. And then I invented this little, it was like the thing that turns the shades in a motel room. And my grandfather put a little hangman noose on it. And I waited over there and I waited for that lizard to come back to that rock. And when he did, I didn't look at him. I put that stick out with the noose on it, and it literally sat there while I put the noose over its head. And as soon as I turned to look at him, it took off and it snared itself. And I had like my first, well, I shouldn't say handcuff, but my first caught anole as a little kid, and I was ecstatic.
Of course you were. You still
My
remember
grandmother
it.
used to catch them.
Yeah, definitely. I remember it.
Yeah, my grandmother used to catch them for me and stuff. But my actual first experience with a monitor lizard was with a wild caught Nile that was a rescue. And it quickly learned, it was very defensive for obvious reasons. It came from a very, very bad situation. And it learned, I would say in less than a month, that I was the food person. You know, I was the person.
I call it the food monkey.
Yeah, so it learned to hide. Well, I don't want to say learn to hide because I'm pretty sure that's all he ever did. And he learned to come out. And what I would do is I would sit there because in my head, I'm like, I am not getting whipped by that tail. And I am not getting bit because he was a nice size. And I just basically did the maintenance while he was in the corner, you know, just eyeballing me. And like Mike said, I did not make eye contact. I did not do any of that sort of stuff, but kept the clean water, fed. But I would always hang out in the room just watching him because as a kid, that's what I used to love doing. Just sit there and just watch them.
Mhm.
So as another, I don't mean to cut you off, Jen, but that brings me up to this point. As another mentor and guy I really respect and look up to in this thing that we're in is Tom Crutchfield, whose saying is, it's only when the keeper and the capped lose their fear of each other that the magical understanding begins. And man, that guy nailed that saying that he came up with is so true. And we're fearful of the unknown and what we're not sure of. However, if, you know, with time and patience and, you know, a socialization technique, you really could get on the same level with these animals. And when you lose your fear of them and they lose their fear of you, you literally have a great, relationship with this animal. It's beautiful.
Yep. And so many questions arrive from that too. That whole, how do you get your monitor to do that? How do you tame your monitor?
Well, so again, I don't mean to cut you off, Jen, but I'm trying to segue because I got so much I want to talk to Robert about. But Robert had made mention that he wanted to understand a little bit more about how we socialize our animals in captivity. So throughout the years, it was always, you know, you put them in I'm a naturalistic keeper. I like to keep things in naturalistic enclosures, which makes socialization a little harder because they have more places to hide and whatnot. So it used to take months of just trusting each other until you have that magical understanding, so to speak. But when I started breeding my Mertens monitors, I was hatching out so many of them. I had at one point, I had 50 hatchlings in my house. And, you know, 50 hatchlings, it was hard to maintain cleanliness in these enclosures. So what I did was, I'm like, you know what, I got to, along with trying to socialize these animals, captive borns, of course, is a lot easier than wild caughts, but this segues into another thing. So what I did was, in my brain, I'm like, okay, how can I make an enclosure that's easy to maintain while not spooking my animals in you're doing the maintenance? So I came up with what I call Mike's Monitor Socialization Caging System, which didn't start off as that. It started off as like an ease of maintenance thing, Robert. So when I put 25 in this all water bottom, very simple setup. I put 25 in there and then 25 in your traditional monitor setup with plants and logs and, you know, water dish and dirt on the bottom. And it had to be probably about maybe a week. In a week's time, when I would pull my chair up to the all water bottom, my socialization caging system, these 25 little Mertens would come up to the front glass, and they're sitting there like little otters. And I could actually feed them individually, one at a time. They sat calmly, and then the ones in the regular setup, it took a while to really gain their trust because they're always going, they're hiding or whatever. So the simplicity of the setup and the security they get from the water on the bottom really lowered their inhibitions, because the way I diagnosed it was their main sense of security was that water. So whether they were basking on a log over the water, rather than in the other cage, they're basking on a log, but they're over dirt. So now when I would wheel up to the enclosure, those ones would jump off the basking log, and then they'd scurry to their hiding spot. The other ones would sit there just like we were talking about, eye contact. So I could get closer and closer, and I could get a lot closer with those because they knew all they had to do is dive into the water. As soon as they hit the water, obviously the water's crystal clear, but in their minds, they're safe. They're in, murky water. So I kind of really started to run with this as a socialization caging system. Then when I had received my adult wild-caught Varanus togienus, I was like, I wonder if that would work on adult wild-caught. So I built a larger version of the socialization caging system, and there's video on my Instagram and whatnot of these togienus. The one I call OJ because he's a killer, man. He'll literally slice you up. But you know what? He'll come to me now. He'll crawl out on my arm, and it's I attribute the success to Mike's Monitor socialization caging system and the security that they get from the water. Mm-hmm. Whether it is what it is, I don't care. It's tried and true, and it's so many people ask me other breeders that I'm friendly with. I'm friendly. I try to be friendly with everybody. In my younger days, I may have been jealous, but I'm not that way anymore. So Nick Lillis, who's like, I love that kid. He said, he's actually a competitor of mine with certain species. And he goes, "Hey, Unc, how do you get your coming eye so tame?" So I walked him through the whole thing. And now I got another guy who sings the praises of my socialization caging system. And it's really spreading. And me, I don't care. I'm glad that it's working for these animals. And these animals are going on to have good captive lives, and they're not afraid of their keepers. So that's a win-win for me.
How long did it take you, Mike?
Does this work for species that aren't aquatic too? Sorry, Jim.
Pardon?
No, it's fine. It does. I think you did recommend the socialization system to somebody who has, I believe, water monitors.
Yeah,
and it worked too.
This socialization caging system, I call three. So captive born hatchlings, and then you have wild caught larger animals, it's all the same thing but larger. And then I have, for when I was breeding a lot of Odatrias, Kimberly Rocks and Ackies and Gilleni and Kingorum, I tried to think of what would work for them to relieve their inhibitions of being scared. I mean, hatchling monitors are scared of everything. So number one, you start with, you don't approach from above. You try to put them at your head level. That secures them. And so the one that I've developed for scrubland species, drier species, is basically the same thing. Dirt on the bottom, a very small cage, it'd be a vertical thermal gradient. So just a piece of bark against the back wall of a very small Exoterra type cage with a spittily fake plant over it. And what they do is they want to bask. So they go on this basking, and they can choose where they want to go. And they're hiding underneath this spittily plant. Now they think they're blending in real well with the cork flat or the bark, whatever it is. And they're very comfortable sitting there. They feel secure in their hiding. So then you just slowly go in there with, whatever their favorite food is. Like I've noticed Kimberly Rock monitors blew my mind. one day I was just messing around with food and I had a bunch of stuff open and I took some chopped silver sides. And I was like, I wonder if my Kimberly, right? They don't even know what a fish smells like. So I passed it in there. Oh my goodness. That was one of their favorite food items was chopped silver sides. So that, working with them with food and, quietness and then placement of the enclosure. And they very quickly come around to realize that you're not a threat.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for babbling on.
No, it's fine because
your show.
For people to know this, yeah, because
It's your show, Robert. You're the guest. So,
ladies and gentlemen, you've heard him give us this explanation of how he gets to get a monitor to accommodate to become tractable. I have a lizard I love dearly who has the personality of the cartoon version of the Tasmanian devil. And
yes.
I am now going to take the Uncle Mike tractionable monitor lizard test and put it to the test, and I will get word back to him. Whether or not he ever wants me on the show again, I will get word back
No,
to him.
you're coming back. You're definitely
we're definitely doing Robert Sprackland 2.0 without a doubt. There's so much I could talk to you about. But yeah,
Well, I've already learned so much from you two. I'm just my head. I got to borrow that monitor brain to get some more, memory.
Yeah, I got you.
Like from my perspective, like I didn't even know Mike when I had gotten my monitors, and for the most part, they're hatchlings, and I always stood in the room that they were in, to the point that they were so accustomed to seeing me day in and day out. I didn't actually attempt to touch them. I just put my hand in the enclosure, and they came on their own. And
Yeah,
this was like in a month's time.
Yep.
And stuff. And then next thing you know, they got so used to me being around, and I would do small pens. And the reason for that is anything that would startle them and they run off somewhere, they're tiny enough to wedge themselves in places they shouldn't be. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. So I would they have these pens for like rabbits and guinea pigs that is like PVC siding with rubber footing so they can't, shift over. And I started with these little tiny pens, and I would work with them, letting them crawl out, letting them explore. And as they grew older, the pens started getting bigger as well. And
how did the pens grow?
Yeah, what?
How did the pens grow? Did you feed them?
No, I took them apart and just added more walls to it and stuff. Okay. And then next thing you know it, they had free reign. And now they're in my place, and I alternate who free roams and who doesn't. They know where to go as far as basking. They've even began to go to the bathroom in a quasi litter box portion. They have 3 places in the actual apartment that they go.
You remember I told you earlier about Rodan and Sudan, the Bengals?
Yep.
Yeah.
Rodan was the bigger one. I got him a few months before the other one. But he had free roam in my dormitory room, which is a fair-sized room. It's just me. And he learned to go slide off the window there. I happen to have a room that faced east. So he'd crawl up on the window ledge, get his son in the morning. And when he had to go to the bathroom, he just kind of slide off into the trash can. And he was big enough that he just could stand up to grab the side and come back out. It took a while. I did a lot of cleaning up. But yeah, it's amazing.
They learn it. It's, you know what? It's the same thing as you moving to a new place. And you have to acclimate to the environment. Okay, I'm going to put this here. This is going to be my workstation. This is going to be my side of the bed because it's no longer the same side as it was in my old place. It's exactly what they go through. And that, again, it's just testament to their intelligence, because I moved from one place to another, and they adapted. Once they knew, oh, wait, that's my table. Oh, wait, that's where I usually bask at. Once they recognized those things, it was second nature to them. It was just second nature that they go here and the other one goes over there, and they actually just took over.
And you were talking to me earlier about the monitor you called Newt. We were discussing that on Messenger.
Yeah, prior, yeah.
Does Newt have run of the house or a spare amount of time?
Yes.
He just gave me the impression, I know this place, I got it down, I know where I can eat, I know where I got to go to the bathroom, I know where I can look out the window.
Yeah. He's actually younger than Ree. Ree's just a tad bit bigger than him. And if he hears the kitchen sink go on, he waits on the kitchen mat because he automatically assumes that food's being thought out for me. Whatever she's doing is for me.
Bjorn does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they both do. They'll both wait at a certain spot in the kitchen because they know that food's coming. And the same thing. I have a shower stall. I don't have a tub. And the first thing that when that shower head goes on, oh, it's going to be warm water time. I'm
Every
gonna go in
time.
there. And I'm just like, no, that's for me, dude. You close the bathroom, no, you close the bathroom and you hear them scratching at they want in. They're like, no, you don't do those things without me type of situation. So yeah, they actually have a small fridge for all their needs, as well as half of my freezer. They learned how to open it.
Oh my God.
They learned how to open it. Now I actually have to lock it. Like I have the child lock for children because that fridge is small. It's meant to go like on a counter, but it's small enough and I don't have counter space where it's on the floor. The other day I heard like, you know, when you're shifting stuff in your freezer that it sounds like rocks or ice. And I'm saying to myself, why does that sound like, and I was like, oh my God. So I run from the bedroom to the kitchen and sure enough, they're like half their bodies in the freezer. And it's Newt, mind you. It's Newt. Newt's taking off and he's got mother of reptile sausages, the whole pack in his mouth. And I'm like, no, dude, no. Take it from him. And he's looking at me like, but it's mine. This is my stuff. So yeah.
You know what you're saying about him being able to pick the lock and to get it, not to pick the lock yet, but they're able to get in. This monitor that I'm asking your advice about is
what species is that, Rob?
Yeah.
Varanus indicus from Western.
No problem. That'll work great in the socialization cage.
Good. He's smart. I mean, Fred is also scary smart. On a couple of occasions as I've had him, my wife and I have taken trips where we'd be gone for more than a week. And so I'd get some friend over and I'd give him 2 or 3 sessions and show him, look, it's real simple. Just do this. It's just for a week. It's just for 2. And in both cases, 3 cases of the 2 of the 3 cases we were gone, Fred managed to get out of his terrarium. And my friend said, I don't know how he did it, but it's the kind with the windows that open in the front. And he says, I came in, the windows were open, and I couldn't find him. And both times I had to look around for a while. Once he was behind the refrigerator. Talk about being able to hide in the smallest spot. He was in the refrigerator between the coils and the other time he was in back of the books on the bookcase. And I had to take all these books off to get him. So anyway, he did this once after we'd come home and he got bored after a couple of weeks and he did it again. But I found him crawling up the bookcase. I put him back in the terrarium, closed the terrarium, and turned that little latch, which is a lock. And then he made his fatal mistake. He didn't wait till I left. He comes over, he looks down at the lock, and there's an opening on the inside.
Yeah.
I'm not making an obscene gesture. It's just that he used finger number 3, and he's reaching down in there. And I swear, I'm watching a movie of, like when they have an animal being the bad guy picking off.
Right.
And all of a sudden, on the outside, I see that little thing turning, and the window's open.
I'm so not surprised. I sound surprised, but I'm not surprised.
Literally, as soon as they open, he comes flying out. I grabbed him and I put him back in, and then I got some, those Allen wrenches, the ones with the bend in them.
Yeah, you got to put a pin in there.
And so I closed the terrarium again, and then they have a place for a lock, and I just stuck that in there.
Yeah,
that's the only way he stays in his terrarium now.
Yeah, yep, they're highly intelligent. Yeah. So with what we started. So I want to get into the meat and bones of this. What I'm really curious about. This is your show. We want to hear from you, and we do what we do. You do what you do. So I want to get into some taxonomy, if you would. Okay. And again, I wanted to, because I'm very curious about this, how you guys do this and how you come up with it. And again, a big shout out to my brother Brian Waterloo, who back in our early days, Brian's a very close friend. I love the guy, and I can remember one Friday night when he's kind of a normal guy. I'm kind of not a normal guy with my younger days. I wanted to do other things, and he says to me one night, he goes, a Friday night of all days, he goes, Now, mind you, I'm like probably 20, 25, something like that. He goes, hey, what are you doing this weekend? I said, I don't know, running around. Why? What's up? He goes, hey, you want to get together and we'll do some scale counts? I'm like, I'm chasing women, bro. I'll talk to you, do your scale counts. I'll talk to you later. But he shows you his dedication. He's very dedicated to monitor lizards. So what I wanted to talk about with the taxonomy is, which I've never, 40 years playing with these lizards. It's never kind of been a thing of mine, is their taxonomy. However, I don't, people get mad at me. I don't care, whatever it is. I'm kind of a purist. So I don't want hybrids in this thing that I love. I try to even keep it down to where I don't cross localities. So with that being said, when I got my Varanus togianus, I was telling you earlier how I lost 2 females, one gravid, one laid her eggs and then passed. I was desperate to find another female. Jana Dragna contacted me and said, hey, Cold-Blooded Shop has Varanus togianus, a female. So I went and looked on Morph Market, whatever the case was. And I'm like, John, that doesn't look anything like my togianus. He goes, well, it's togianus, but it's from Sulawesi. So it was a different locale. So I got the animal. I wasn't real happy. It was a male. I needed a female. Wasn't real happy with it. But that lizard grew on me, a big 9-pound lizard. It just grew on me. Such a beautiful, calm animal, totally unlike the Toji Island form, which is jet black with white rings around her nose and then white zebra stripes on her throat. This one was very large. I have a full-grown male. I had them of each, of Sulawesi and Toji Island form. So I started noticing, I'm like, there's no way, whether they're grouped in the same species or not, there's no way these 2 animals are the same species. Their behavior was totally different. The Sulawesi was very tractable, and it's a wild-caught animal. Very tractable right out of the gate, where, like I said, OJ wanted to kill me. And the size was different. Their body structure was different. Their color pattern was different. So how do you differentiate that type of situation as far as localities go? Does that possibly warrant new species status for either or?
All right, and that's our time for today. Join us next week.
I'm sorry. No, I wanted to set that up right.
No, that's great. That's great because you get the detail in there. There has, within the world of taxonomy, the business of what is a species has been contentious for a long time. Every time somebody comes up with a definition, a lot of other people come up with exceptions. And what it's come down to, something that a few people like myself had started proposing in the late 1970s, was that the definition for a species pretty much needs to be taxon related. Like the way you're going to define species with insects is going to be different than the way you define species with sexually reproducing vertebrates, which is going to be a little different than the way you do it with parthenogenic vertebrates, which is going to be different than the way you do it with octopuses. That's because they're animals. They're different. Biology, okay, in physics, you learn the rules of what the universe can do. In chemistry, you learn how the things in the universe can mix it together and what they'll become. And in biology, you got those other 2 things, and it's the science of exceptions. Whatever you come up with in biology, there's going to be an exception. All mammals lay eggs, except for these 2 monotremes, right? All the lizards were non-venomous, except for these 2 little guys in the Southwest. So biology being a science of exceptions, we also need to have some way of exceptional taxonomic definitions. And some of the definitions, some of the approaches they were workable with certain animals. Probably the most familiar to most biology students who have studied through college on this is the biological species concepts. And the idea is that if you have 2 members of a population that can interbreed, can have sex and produce offspring that are viable, don't die, and that got added up with the the idea that the viable offspring themselves must not be sterile. They must be able to interbreed with other members of that population. Then that's a species. But then you have things like the parthenogenic species. It's just all female populations. You know, they're not asexual, they're unisexual, as opposed to things like amoebas and what that just kind of split. Now they're asexual. There's no sex there. There's just, hey kid, I got enough stuff, I'm going to split. Whereas, and then you've got the possibility of animals hybridizing within a genus. We've seen a lot of examples of that. All of the python morphs, and a lot of the king snake morphs and the corn snake morphs. But then we've also got a lot of examples of animals that are crossing and producing offspring across genera. And, you know, when you're at that level, that throws the biological species concept out as a universal. So what had to be done is say, okay, this applies with this kind of species, but there are different kinds of species, different definitions for what that species is. Now, what you're talking about with these Sulawesi animals, when I went to the museum in Berlin back in 91 and 92, and I was looking at all of the varanids there, Wilhelm Peters was the one that described Togianus, and so the type series was there. And I came away from my first visit thinking that all the things that were in this jar, and they were all listed as being from Sulawesi or Togian Island, but they were very different. And I thought, okay, what I'm looking at, there's just variation here. And it wasn't until much later when I was looking at a different group of lizards that I realized the Sulawesi is a big place, and there's a difference between being on the island and the mainland. What we probably had in that jar, because he didn't go out and collect them, Peters didn't collect them, he got them from somebody who went out and brought them back to Germany in the 1870s. And what he probably had was things that were just poorly labeled. That happened a lot. You know, Darwin's finches, he never could put the finches to the island because he just collected a bunch of them. It wasn't until they were sailing away that he realized, oh my goodness, they're different from different islands. Which islands? With Peters and these animals, I think he took some from southern Sulawesi, some from northern Sulawesi, from some Togian, and they wound up in the same big jar with the same general locality label. And when I went back and looked at my notes, it seemed to me that, no, these aren't the same thing. But there are also so few specimens from there that you can't really make a good decision based on really old preserved animals. Colors are faded. Back then, you couldn't get genetic material out of them. You know, that's something new that you get out of alcoholic specimens. And so we had to wait to the point that somebody is bringing live ones in.
Well, hopefully I could do that with both for you this year.
I remember when you first put that to me. I'm waiting. Like that's I'm waiting for that.
Yeah,
I get excited. I've been doing taxonomy. I was interested in taxonomy almost since I went to college. It was like my third year of college that I really. One of my mentors was Edward Taylor, and he was just pretty much purely a taxonomist, and he kind of got me moved in that direction. And so I've always been interested in what is a species, where do you draw the lines, what are the mechanisms for speciation, and is it really possible to objectively tell that you have different species? So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing these. I've never gotten over the thrill of seeing something new.
And it's really crazy as this is all happening, like I said, everything happens for a reason. As this is all happening, I produce these the Togian Island form, and they come out black, and they have like a light flecking on their back, which there's no pattern to it. It's just strictly flecked. And then I've seen young, which are probably just a little older than hatchlings from Sulawesi, which the dots are much larger, and they lack the white on their nose and the white in their throat. So I'm thinking,
so you got the rings on the nose. You got the rings on the nose of the ones from Togi.
From Togi, yes.
From Togian Islands.
Yes.
Okay, that matches the holotypes that Peters has. According to Peters, and according to just what we're talking about, then that is true Togianus.
Okay.
So that's a big plus. And you got the other ones. Yeah, those rings make a big difference. If I had time to go through, I'd pull out my notebook pictures and my slides, and I'd show it to you. I'll send it to you separately. But yeah, Togianus definitely, kind of like lace monitors. They're very characteristic, those rings.
Right.
They're pale. They're like nearly white.
Right.
Okay. I couldn't tell for sure because, again, the alcoholic specimens lose color, but they were close enough to white. Yes. Okay. That's the kind of nose.
Yeah.
Is that you showing me the nose? Or are you offering me a drink?
Oh, you can have a drink too. But so
Okay.
yeah. So like I was saying about the difference in the two, what's the process then? The Togian Islands would remain Togianus, and then these new Sullas would get a different name.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah. And we have people wonder about taxonomy. If you're not taxonomist, we actually have a book. Now, this was the last printed edition, 2000, the 4th edition. It's now all electronic because even as this was going to press, we were dealing with the problem: how do you describe an animal electronically? One of the requirements for actually making a name is it has to be in an indelible form. You can't go back to the publication and change the name, because the first name used is the name, except for two things. If the animal had already been named by somebody else, had a different name, but nobody knew about it, you still have to go back to that name instead of the new one. The other thing is that if there's a mistake made in the spelling of the name, then there's a couple of pages of instructions what to do. For example, when alligator was first described, alligator mississippiensis, they left out a P. And so a few years later, they did an amendment and they put the other P in properly spelled.
Wow.
right.
Wow. That's so
Okay.
cool.
So with
Those are the only two times you can mess around with the name. Island. The specimens that I saw that have the rings had a clear label said Togian Island. The other one just said Sulawesi, which almost means nothing. But because Peters gave a description of it, he assigned a name to a specific specimen. We could go back, as I have. You could go back and look at that specimen. Togianus is now it's in terms of literature, it's brand that name. But the things from Sulawesi, there are no really good reports, taxonomic reports of the varanids from Sulawesi. Most of the reports that I've ever come across about monitors from Sulawesi have been from ornithologists that happen to see them along the way.
right.
One of the problems that biology has, zoology has, is that if it's not your field. I've literally had I've had this kind of thing happen several times, but I literally had a colleague once, and we were talking about, again, mechanisms of evolution. And then somehow the conversation came around. I told him I'm interested in the lizards of New Guinea. He says, "Oh, it's in New Guinea. I found this really neat lizard there." "Oh, did you collect it?" No. "Did you get pictures?" "No." "Well, what kind of lizard?" He says, "Well, it was about that big and it was green." "What was it?" And I'm thinking, if I came back and said I found a bird that was that big and had blue feathers, what would you think of?
Oh, I think he froze again.
Hey, I don't mean to interrupt you, Doctor.
But
Can you do us a favor? We're at an hour now, but I'm not giving up on you after an hour. We got to keep this going. Can you jump out and we'll jump back in?
This whole board.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm jumping out.
Yep. Jump out.
Bye.
Thank you.
I hope.
And ladies and gentlemen, while we get Robert back, we have right now, I just wanted to thank you, Essen, for your super chat. But he also placed a question about what would you guys say is the most tameable mid-sized tree, mangrove monitor, peach stroke, quince, mangrove, bluetail, tricolor.
My opinion is, if you work with them right and you gain that trust and understanding, any one of those is a very tractable animal. It's a matter of how you deal with that animal.
Yes, a lot of it. I know people who have every monitor that you've actually have mentioned in your question, and there's been successful socialization and there's been botched socialization. It's your commitment. I think your other question had that you're building a 7x7x6 enclosure. You're going the right direction, but Mike also has videos on his socialization.
Yeah, that's a rough way to start. The bigger,
you might want to go that.
I'm sorry, the bigger, more naturalistic enclosures, it's gonna take you some time. I mean, that's how we used to do it. It's all fine and well, but with the socialization caging system, if you keep them in there until they outgrow that, and you've created a great relationship with your animal. I tell people with my animals that, I sell my animals pre-socialized, but look, this is what they're used to seeing. So when they come to your house and your beard's longer or you have no beard, it's going to take a little time for them to get used to you. They're not dumb animals, but starting off in a giant naturalistic enclosure is kind of detrimental. You can do it, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience to establish that relationship. I tell people, you can put them in your backyard, and when you walk outside, that animal's going to come running to you for security, food, comfort, whatever the case may be.
I'm sorry. Aiden Bradley has a question for Robert. Are Demurrals Robert's favorite monitor? Can you see that, Robert?
Aiden, I don't have children. Yeah, I hear that. Aiden, I don't have children. I'm not a father, never was. But I do understand from my relatives and in-laws that have children, you don't have a favorite. At least you're not allowed to have a favorite. If I were going to say what monitors would I most want to be spending the next several years of my life with that I don't happen to have because they were given to me, it would be a Demurrals monitor and a green tree monitor. I've had both of those. I know how to get them to accommodate and relate to me. Both of those have been free roaming in my home. I had the first imported Varanus Demurralii, and that's why I wrote my first serious paper about them. They're incredible, and they're outliers in so many ways. As you know, good goodness, you breed them, get them almost coming out your metaphysical ears. The color changes that they go through from hatching out of the egg just through the first week, and then from there until the point they become these brown and tan things. It's very rapid, and there's nothing quite like it. Yeah, there are other monitors that go through this really wild color phase, but in the contest of extremism, Demurralii has the award.
They take the cake.
Yeah, and they eat the whole thing themselves too.
Yeah.
And they can be so placid. I have had several of them over the years. The biggest one I had was 48 inches from one end to the other, and he was, without a doubt, and I never would have said this a few years ago, but he probably was a lot like your I forgot, Newt.
Oh, my Asian water monitor. Yeah.
I never tried to get him to come when called, but I did use hand gestures. If I was
They understand that too,
and
especially this one.
Yep, and he would just watch me, and I'd put my hand down on the side of my chair, and I would do this gesture with him, the two fingers and waving.
Excuse me, guys. I
he
have
would
to
come
go.
over, and then expect something to be fed.
I'll be right back.
Okay. He would definitely expect to be fed. I would take him out in the backyard with me. I put a very light tether on him because at that point it was just in case. And I didn't know what range of tameness could have. And he would come out there in the backyard with me. He'd bask in the sun. When he wanted to get out of the sun, there was a big tree near where I had my little lounge chair. And he would just crawl around either to the side of the tree and just kind of crawl up far enough to be in the shade, or he'd crawl into the lounge chair because I back then I was able to provide a lot of shade. So that would be the thing. If I could get a baby Demurrals monitor and raise it up, I'd dance on the ceiling for at least 2 hours when he got here again. That's that kind of a thing. And the same with the tree.
Cool. They are like, I actually, at one point when I saw like the color variation from hatchling to adulthood, it blew my mind, but it makes sense. I mean, they're one way when they're the most vulnerable, and then they migrate into a whole nother color scheme when, they're, I guess, more comfortable, more established,
Mm-hmm.
and
they also move into a different ecology, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So
I'm back.
Hi, Mike. Welcome.
Hi.
Mike,
So
how you been? How you doing?
great.
So,
That was great. That was great,
With the
Demurral talk. So with the taxonomy
the
again,
same kind of thing that they were
Hold on one second.
amenable to being out in the.
No, I'm just making sure that you're still with us.
Yes.
Sorry.
Go on, Robert.
Go on.
Let me go back to Mike's question.
Yes.
Okay. Why didn't we know about the things in Sulawesi? Why didn't we know about Varanus macraei? Why didn't we know about Malinus and so many things? When Robert Mertens did his monograph, his monster monograph, and did this during World War II, bless him, including subspecies, he had 25 taxa. Okay. Now the book that I'm writing, I've gone through the literature, looked at specimens, and whether you want to call them species or subspecies, I don't really believe in subspecies. So everything that's a subspecies by somebody, I raise up. There are now 102 named. And I have a list of at least 8 other localities and pictures of the specimens that aren't named. And I'm very sure that there are many, many more. Indonesia's got thousands of islands, every one potentially.
Yeah.
Okay, I even mentioned this back in my book. I said the primary difficulty in studying many of these species is their distribution in parts of the world that still recall the old map maker's phrase, "Here be dragons." And yes, many of them. Yeah. Now we've got people who are going out there. You know, people like Chris Applin, and he's there most of the time. He's got people looking at islands that I haven't heard of, and I've spent a long time studying.
And he's keeping good data too, which is very important.
Absolutely. And that's going to make a big difference. Now, I don't know who collected your specimens from Sulawesi, but the fact that you've got at least 2 distinct morphs, color morphs, and I'll tell you from the scales that you sent me, and a big thank you to everybody out there who has donated skin samples, shed skin samples for my work. I will, in the book, I will tell you how important they are. But right now, let me just stress they are important. There's a lot of information in looking at the skin structures in monitors. And your Togianus, when I looked at that, my first response was to go back and look at the envelope and make sure I'd read it right, because it didn't even look like any of the monitors I had. This is a monitor alien in terms of that feature. And that's why I want to see more, because, you don't just have one weird trait like that.
What is the trait that, that enthralled you?
Well, when you're looking at microstructures, there are several things, but the 2 of them that really got me is that the scale of a monitor is very complex. It looks like it's made of many different parts. And if you look at them under a microscope, you'll see like there's a big plate scale, and then there's a ring of moderately sized, and then a little bit smaller, and then much smaller. And then there's usually at one end, at the posterior, there's one big scale on the side. And then they kind of go down into very, very small scales that give you the gap to start the next scale. Right. Not into the anus. This thing on the top, it just takes over the whole scale.
Wow.
It's just, you have the little rings, but on the top, you just have this one big thing, and it's shaped like the carapace of a crab. Okay.
Wow.
Now the other ones, they're either oval or they're almost round, but nothing that has shapes coming out. And I mean it. If you look at the carapace of a crab, there's the front. I'm talking like the blue crabs and all. You got the carapace, and you got these things that point out towards the front. Back. And that's what they have. And they have it on all the samples that I saw. I haven't seen ventral scales. You got to send me ventral scales. But all of the dorsals and the laterals, and you also sent me a section of armpit, and even in there, nothing like that in any other variety. Okay.
So
you look at any others and you don't know varanids, you could at least say, "Oh yeah, monitor," and then you get to your Togianus, you get monitor. What the heck is that? That's where I went. And I'm using a very high-powered microscope. I'm looking at this thing at 54 times magnification. It fills a screen. I'm looking at the scale. It's like that big to me, and it just blew my mind.
Now I sent you.
Excuse me 1 second, guys. All right, just keep going. I'll be right back.
Okay, I sent you what I'm, the Togi Island form, and I've sent you Stola form as well. Is there a difference between those 2?
Yeah. The Sulawesi form, it's a monitor.
Typical monitor.
I mean, of course, the other one, looking at the pictures, of course, it's a monitor. I saw the type specimens. Yes, it's a monitor. But in terms of its scales, the Sulawesi falls in with the other 101 species.
Right.
And then this thing, Togian, that's going to be one of its defining characteristics. It's got these really crazy, weird scales.
And what is it? Environmental adaptation, or what have you drawn? I know it was early. We've just done this, but what kind of conclusions have you come to in regards to this?
Yes. Without more data, I hesitate to make a guess.
I
The
understand.
only I've seen in a few other lizards I've looked at in the past. The only other things that, and this is way out there, folks. Don't quote this in the literature saying Sprackland said. If you're going to say anything, say Sprackland believes, possibly, maybe. The scale resembles that I've seen in animals that live in places where there's high parasitism in some species. And the few species that in that area that seem to have fewer external parasites have this. It's more like plating than just scales. Okay? That's my guess. Throw it out there. Do they live in a place where there are particularly virulent biting flies that carry terrible diseases? If you've got like there are some biting flies that you get stung by them. They live in New Jersey, those yellow green-headed things. You know you've been nailed by that fly. It's like getting a hot iron stuck in there. If you got
Right.
stuff like that, most lizard scales will probably defend them against it. What the insects do is they go between the scales where there's a weak spot. Yeah. But with this kind of scale, you're going to need a lizard that has, an electric drill to get in there because the scale is thick. It's very horny. I'm not talking about a weak, strangely shaped scale. It looks like a crab shell, and in terms of texture, it reminds me of a crab shell. It's tough. It's tougher than most varanid scales at that level.
Wow. So, very impressive.
Or completely wrong.
Well, hey, you know what? I'll stick with the impressive.
Okay. Will you send me more stuff? I have more data. And
I will definitely, I wasn't sure if so you need more ventral stuff.
Well, I can use both because, different points in the shedding. For example, if it's a very fresh shed, there tend occasionally to be structures that dry and fall off. And I won't go into detail there, but there are things that I can see in a fresh shed if it's sent to me quickly, especially like you put it in plastic, so it's pretty much protected from the air.
Right.
Those have more information than some of the older sheds. But there's a very nice woman who works with abronia, these Mexican lizards of the anguid, Mexican alligator lizards.
Very cool.
And she sent me some skin samples from those. And the shape of the scale is different, but the general structure and the layout that I'm talking about being larger and less space in between them and looking like they're more plate than just scale. That's the only thing I've seen that's similar to the togi.
Okay,
so maybe something similar in the
wild.
environment. They're totally different habitats. They could be something. They might both have terrible biting insects.
Right. So that brings me to two more thoughts. Different than Ruticolus?
Oh God, yes.
Okay.
Ruticolus,
and different than Lanthanotus, obviously. I mean,
yes. Lanthanotus looks like it has tough scales, but it's
there's a lot of skin there.
It's the easiest way to say it. It has relatively standard skin thickness, texture, structure. There's some variation that I'll be explaining in the book, but they just have slightly larger regular scales.
Right.
Ruticolus and Togianus and Abronia, they have very different kinds of scales. Okay.
Great to know.
That is so cool. Like that opens up like a whole bunch of more questions, I would assume. I mean,
and just to put it out there for you, Robert, I have at least one pair of Lanthanotus coming next week, so I'll be able to work with them and send you some sheds from them and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So, yeah,
I can try to get Newt to write you a letter.
That would be nice. That would. But will it be on the keyboard, or he's going to do it longhand?
No, I think he's practicing his script. Okay. He knows they're not doing it anymore in schools, so he's trying to keep it old school.
Yeah. So I write all my manuscripts. I always write out first, and I always write it out in script.
Yeah.
I like to write.
So I have one more taxonomical thing that I'd like to put in my brain, and I'm a long time. There's probably the first species I bred was Jobiensis, Jayapura types, and and I've seen, of course, we don't know the facts on where these animals are collected. Now we kind of do, but I'm talking back in the early '90s. I had the Jayapuras, and then I had one that came in, and it was called a Maruk jobiensis. This animal it looked like a typical peach throat. However, its face and throat was more of it was dark purple. It was a beautiful, beautiful animal. I don't know if it was actually from Maruk or it was just a variable animal. But now with these Batantas that have come in I have both here now, and the look, the body style, almost like the Togianus. To me, I see a major difference between that jobiensis and these Batanta animals. So is there a possibility that that's separate species as well?
Okay. Now here's when it's not going to be. Now Sprackland didn't say this time. I'm going to say I said, and it's part of what I'm writing about now. Jobiensis, like Indicus before it, is a complex.
Yes.
Okay. There's several species.
Okay.
And that's all that I can. It's all I can say because right now that's all that I know. I'm still trying to get specimens with better locality data, and I've got somebody who seems to be able to help me with that. But you have to understand with the scientific specimen, if you're going to attach a name to it, or if it's going to have any value in a collection for posterity. I mean, I'm looking at specimens that were collected over 200 years ago. That's how you establish taxonomy. You need to have, like in police work, you have a chain of evidence. We have a chain of evidence and specimens.
It has to be a repeatable.
Yep. And without good locality data, we have very limited use for an animal. So
right.
The idea that these jobiensis things are real is demonstrated by the fact that they're real. Think about this: you go someplace and you want to cash a check or whatever, and you do this. They say, "Show me your ID," and you have to show them a piece of plastic. Wait a minute, I'm me. This is me. The plastic is going to tell you that I'm me, but I'm me. If you understand what I'm saying,
I do.
That something else is more important than the meanness of it. I need something to tell you that I'm me.
Right.
In a way, it's the same kind of thing. You need to have that locality data to verify not so much what that species is, but where it came from, because locality is very important to assigning what you were asking about before, species lines.
Right.
I think about the divergence and convergence around the world. I can have a species in South America that's a dead ringer for one in Southeast Asia. And without the data, somebody might not be able to tell the difference. I mean, there are ways, but still, it would be much more difficult. But if you had the data on it, the original specimen of Varanus salvator was listed as America. That's it.
Wow.
Okay. Southeast Asian water monitor, the type specimen is America.
Wow. That blows my mind.
That's a little wrong.
Yeah.
That's a little wrong. That's where the labels. You have to call the labels into question.
Well, that's one
monitor, and you said this thing was from New Zealand. That's going to raise a lot of. Wait a minute, that can't be.
Right. So, what I've long said about all these animals is, humans, we like to categorize everything. That's kind of what we do, and we put labels on everything. And I always say, we could call them, and especially common names. I don't even like using common names. So we use these Latin scientific type names, and that's what we call them. And I always said, these animals, they know what they are. They know, what I mean? Not in our sense of it, but in their umwelten, which is a thing, Tom Crutchfield talks about. Every a fly sees the world different than a goldfish, and so on. So these animals, they know what they are, what's important to them, not what's important to us. So by us putting labels on it, it differentiates species and localities for us. However, these animals don't need none of that. They know what they are. They know what to do. But I think it is very, it's very helpful for us to do the work that we're trying to do with these animals to differentiate localities and species. So while it's really unimportant to the animal, it is important to us from a conservation type perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, many years ago, when I was working on my doctorate, one of the pair of papers I was doing on the tongue colors of monitors, it hadn't been something that was discussed except in a couple of places that, oh, the tongue color on this thing is such and such. But I was looking at what I had done for my doctorate was look at the Varanus indicus complex, and I noticed that there's significant tongue colors. And where you have two species, what turned out to be two species, you'll have two different tongue colors. Where you have three species, you tend to have three different tongue colors. Now, those three tongue colors are pretty much consistent. You have either pale yellow, or you have pink, or you have purple. But those colors, as you spread out across New Guinea and Northern Australia, you tend to find very, very rare cases where two populations of the monitor will both have like purple tongues. They're going to have different tongue colors. But yeah, we need to look at specimen. That's something you can't tell from a pickled animal. Try to get the mouth open on most preserved animals. You break the jaw.
Oh.
And of course, you lose the color.
Yep.
Yeah. I was going to say the chemicals.
That's right. Think of how many species were named Azorius, okay? Because by the time that they were collected in the New World, by the time they got to Europe, then they're in rum or whatever preservative, they're blue.
They're blue.
That's because all of the yellow pigment had been dissolved. It had digested out. When you go see them in the wild, all of these Azorius, my God, they're bright green.
Right.
And so you also have a limited amount of information you can get from a specimen. And the older it is, there's a curve. This is fresh. It's in the field. There's my best information. And I put it in alcohol, and it's relatively new. I still have good information. And then it takes this ride across the Atlantic by ship. And then it sits in a jar for 35 years before somebody looks at it. And you're under the chart now.
Yeah.
So this is where the stuff that's going on with monitors now is so important. I think is important. As a taxonomist tells me about evolution. Evolution tells us about patterns. It tells me about environments. It tells me about behavior and the adaptations that one needs for this. And it's hard to get to the second step if the first step is lousy. So
yeah. Well,
does that also help with like establishing a connection between environments getting worse and worse, and how these animals are trying to adapt to it, and maybe that's a contribution to their dying off and stuff like that, because a lot of people don't connect the dots there and stuff. So if you're getting a specimen and you're studying this specimen and you're getting all this information, like, I mean, you're talking about skin, you're talking like, what else is it that you're looking at that's going to help you determine not only species, but locales, and the health of these animals and the health of the environment around them? Like, what else is it that you're looking at as a taxonomist?
Well, in most cases, it's back to the scale counts and a lot of external stuff, pattern, and so on. And I look at that too. But the work I've been doing has included the interior. I've been going organ by organ, system by system. And, just as another example, there's only been one really, there's been one drawing, an illustration of the varanid kidney that's shown up in textbook after textbook after textbook. First thing I want to say is there's no such thing as the varanid, okay? As I said, we've got 102 species so far, okay? Secondly, why would anybody assume that with all the differences on the outside, if that morphology is different, why wouldn't you expect it on the inside?
Right. Yeah.
Work
True.
with kidneys is showing that varanid kidneys are quite different. Recent work has been with rainforest species, and as of next week, I'll be tearing apart some desert species. Which excuse
me, Robert. Robert, excuse me, please. Again. Yeah, can you jump off and come back? Because I don't want to miss any of this, man. I'm hanging on to this.
It's really good.
Very hard. I want to catch it all. So, Jen, this has been great. I mean, Robert Sprackland is amazing. And yeah, I'm looking forward to what we got going on when he comes back on. I want to talk a little bit more about scale morphology and ultraviolet radiation and due to the sun. So hopefully he can lend into that. There you go. There's his book.
Okay, so I know I'm back if you can see that.
Okay, so you were saying
You were talking about
inside compared to outsides.
Yeah, the insides can be different. The kidneys are amongst the rainforest species I've looked at, and that's been Prasinus, Demerillii, Beckeri. There are a couple of others, of course, Salvator. The kidneys are similar. Salvator's a little bit differently. They're more aquatic than these other guys. I have a specimen of Glauerdi that I've been working on lately, and its guts are a little bit different than these others. The intestinal tracts, the stomachs are different. The shapes, the lengths. The inside of the stomach, it's got ridges. They're called rugi. And what rugi do is your food goes in there, and if you're not going to suffer heartburn, you have a valve at the top of the stomach or the bottom of the esophagus called the cardiac valve. That closes off, and as you add digestive juices from the cells in the gut, part of that digestive process is going to release gas, hydrogen chloride, so hydrochloric acid. That's why you want that valve shut, or else it comes out and it starts melting on the esophagus, and that's heartburn.
Right.
Well, these lizards have fairly solid, comparatively thicker valves, cardiac valves, if they're desert lizards than if they're rainforest lizards. And in the stomach, the rugi, amongst other things, they get that acid, but they also have these structures that grind and they pulverize food. And then that food sits in the bottom part of the stomach, the pylorus, and it bathes in the gas, in the juices, and dissolves them more. And that means that the stuff in the stomach is going to be there for a while. And you know, when you feed a monitor, the stuff goes down pretty quickly. The flexibility in these stomachs is pretty consistently extraordinary. You know, we couldn't do that. But what's also interesting is that the amount of the amount of the stomach that's rugi is like in some of them, most of it is going to be this nice, relatively empty chamber, and others are going to have a relatively small grinding area. And in others, you're going to see a relatively small introductory room, and then you're going to have a big grinding area. And the big grinding area tends to be found in the ones that we know are eating bigger vertebrates, things that do eat carrion, like Varanus xanthematicus, Varanus niloticus, Varanus salvator. I don't have a complete salvator. Sorry, I don't have a complete salvadorii to look at its guts, but I'd love to, because again, we know very little about it in the wild. I've had a long-standing hypothesis that they eat birds because they have teeth that are unlike any other lizard, not just any other lizard, and they interdigitate. Okay, which means that just like the green tree pythons and the green tree boas, look at the teeth on those things, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because you can't just bite the feathers; the bird will get away. You have to get down into the bird. So why would a big lizard that lives almost exclusively in the trees have big teeth like that? Okay, if he was just eating rodents or small marsupials, he wouldn't need those. But if he's got to get down to where the animal is, okay, so
you got to get food on feathers.
Yeah.
If I could see the stomach, alternately, if I could have one that's fresh killed from the wild and I could open up the stomach, but either way, this is information that you can get from a preserved specimen, with or without labels. The labels are important for identifying the species. No label, species identification is wishy-washy. The idea that Michael was talking about before, the hybridizing to get these weird colors and patterns, there are people who are opposed to that for the puritanical reason. We're not going to be releasing these animals, certainly not back into the wild. But what is different, if it's staying in the hobby, what is different from having a hybrid, like the hybrid king snakes and corn snakes, and my goodness, look what they've done with leopard geckos. If they're staying in captivity, how's that different than the difference between a Chihuahua, a poodle, and Bjorn, who's a Great Pyrenees mountain dog, or what they've done with cats, or what they've done with goldfishes? I mean, the pet use of an animal is different, and it's nothing that concerns me. But like what Mike's saying, he doesn't like to do it, and I like that, because it means that even without a label, he might be able to tell me the parentage. Okay, well, these are the F16, you know, the great grandson of my original Togianus, but I know where that Togianus came from, and I didn't mix it with anything from another locality.
Right.
Now, locality data is useless at that point, but it's a verification. It's like having the card. Okay, you are a Togianus, and you do have, you know, a lineage that goes back here. And if I'm ripping you open, I can say you are representative Togianus. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's important. And I'm real glad to hear you say that.
Well,
you don't like to hybridize.
My main concern with it is, and I might be totally wrong or whatever the case may be, is when I think of there was a guy in the early 90s who was crossing Panoptis, Rubidus, and Flavorufus. And the problem is, like all great monitors. However, man, Flavorufus is such a special monitor. And because of all that crossing that was done, in my opinion, I don't believe you could find pure Flavorufus in our country anymore because you ain't getting them out of Australia. So I'm worried about that with Philippine monitors, especially Coming Eye, because I love Coming Eye. And I've seen some hybrids from them. And man, I'm pretty sure that the Philippines is closed for export now. So, man, it's very important to keep your Coming Eye clean.
Yeah.
To represent.
You should have a good, reliable and verifiable lineage. If you're going to take some of them to go around and hybridize and mess around for the pet trade or because you've got nothing better to do, that's one thing. But you need to keep some lineages clean for the advantage.
Well, can I tell you a little story, Robert? So a guy had just contacted me, and I have a couple of holdbacks. They're about 2 years old of my Mindanao Coming Eye. Beautiful. None of the white out on the back, none of the black masking, just beautiful black and lemon yellow. Now, my original male Lemonhead, he's a big 5-foot animal, and he's too big to breed to his daughter that's a holdback of a couple years. So a friend had just offered me a trade, and I don't just do that. I inspect. I need to, especially since there's been some hybridization done with Coming Eye and Samarensis. So he has this beautiful female, and I want her for my male Lemonhead, who's a big boy, and he can't, play with the little girl I have. But this animal that he has is perfect size for Lemonhead. However, in talking with him, it is one of the Samurais, which is the Coming Eye Samarensis cross. And I as much as I want that animal, I got to stay true to my beliefs, so to speak. So that's part of why I don't like hybrids or even locale crosses. If that makes sense to you.
I think he froze again.
It makes a lot of sense. And am I still here?
Yep. You with us?
Here? Okay.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing is just decide. I am going to breed them because I want to breed that species, or I'm going to breed them because I want to monkey around with the genes and see what I can get. And you got to make that decision. And the really important thing is to make that decision so that somebody else who, if somewhere down the line you actually want to help out, either somebody who's breeding hybrids, you want to help a scientist who's trying to look at the species, that it's this or that, and you're not going to give these hybrids to the scientist who's trying to understand relationships and other things. So.
The relationships in the natural world, where they come.
And I correct me if I'm wrong, Doctor, because you are the man, and I look up to you so much. So people who create these hybrid animals, it's still a big deal to breed any pure Varanid. It's still a huge success in deal. So when you're trying to add this Frankenstein quality that I'm talking about, I try to explain to them, well, that's great. However, you don't have a Samarensis and you don't have a Coming Eye. You don't have Flavorufus or Gould Eye. You have a combination of the both. It's a man-made thing, and it's not like a true representative of a locale-specific animal. So, how do you combat that? How do you try to make somebody understand the importance of keeping them pure?
Not only that, but for future generations too, because if you sell an animal to a person who just wants a pet, and then it winds up for some reason winds up in a breeder's hand and they don't know. I
Well,
mean, they don't
that's
keep their notes or whatever.
that's what
And they start
that's
breeding this animal, and then
Jen.
30 animals down the road, then
Jen, that's exactly what happened with this beautiful animal that I wanted to put to my pure coming eye. And when I found out, I was very depressed because it's a beautiful animal. However, I want to stay true to the species because, like I said, when they close that down, and and I've heard arguments with like, well, if you keep good data, I'm like, man, you might keep good data, and the guy you sell it to might keep good data, but somewhere down the line, that animal's going to wind up in somebody's hands who don't care about that, and it's going to go from his hands to another hand. Now that data is long gone, and I wind up with
There
it.
is.
Go on.
I'm sorry. I don't. If every now and then it's like I'm interrupting you, but that's because you freeze and I start talking because I thought you stopped.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
there is, I think, a fairly simple answer to that question. And I think it's an important question. And that is, we need to have, we already have established a fairly good genetic data bank.
Yep.
It's not extensive enough in terms of individuals, it's extensive in terms of species. But the typical thing, if you read papers about the molecular biology and they talk about how many specimens, so often they'll use one specimen or two specimens or specimens from two different localities that they're assuming it's the same species. What I think we need to do is get the genetic data bank for monitors in this case, where we've got several species, where we have verifiable locations. We also need to get the genetic data from both sexes. Surprise, surprise, boys and girls are different.
Yep.
I don't know, is the administration going to kill me for that? And then and genetically they are distinct. And when we have that information, we can do the same thing that we do with the getting the human DNA to see where your ancestors are, or they have like had me do the DNA test and my dog at the time the DNA test, and they came back, and I'll tell you, I was so surprised to find out that I was 75% golden retriever. But you can do that.
Good one, doctor. Good one.
Scottish Italian. But my retriever was totally black, but he was 75% golden retriever, and the rest of him was border collie, which accounted for his color. And also, he was very smart. But we can do that for dogs now. We do it routinely. They've been doing it for fish, for the fisheries industry, so that we can find out where certain fishes are coming from before we eat them, to make sure they're coming from places that are not in the forbidden zones.
Yep.
They're also doing stuff now called environmental DNA. Some of my colleagues started doing this about 3-4 years ago. You get water sample from a creek. Okay, you get a water sample. Never mind fishing. You get a water sample, and you take this to the lab, and there are processes that they can use to get shed DNA from whatever the heck was living in the creek, and then they can come back and tell you these are the things living here. And oh, by the way, we got this invasive snail or whatever. How do you know? Because I got the DNA for it.
Very
cool.
cool.
The same thing for monitors. It just makes money.
Yeah.
If we had the community willing to kick in a really very small amount. My colleagues at the genetics lab are telling me what it would take for this project that I want to do to identify population differences. This can be done, and then it could be available, because when stuff goes onto the gene bank, it's not someplace, it's not in a journal that you're not going to hear of. It's not going someplace that you could never retrieve it. It's going to a place called GenBank. You can go in there and look it up. Okay, you can send your specimens in to a place that does the DNA, and they can analyze it, and they compare to GenBank, and they will tell you, oh, it's not what you think it is. Or, yeah, you're 75% golden retriever, which for a monitor would really be surprising.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing we have to be thinking about. The people in the hobby have done so much. I mean, certainly when I wrote the first giant lizards, and it was like maybe 90% of first breedings were done by hobbyists. And by the time I did the revision, the second edition in 2006, it was still somewhere around 50 or 60% of the first breedings, and especially the F2 and F3 breedings was being done by the private community, who spends their time and their money and space up in their house, for which they're paying rent and utilities. I mean, add this up. It's not what you folks do is not a word escaped me. It's not some ethereal, nutsy thing. It's not, oh, I got a hobby like collecting dust bunnies. It isn't. You put a lot into it. Time, effort,
Absolutely.
money, place.
Well, along with what you're saying, that I think is very valuable, along with that is, these observations that we make, is I think valuable when, like I said, the difference between the Toji Island and the Sulawesi, the behavioral differences that we observe in private hands in captivity. And it's really refreshing to know that now in the United States, academia is a little more reliant on the private keeper hobbyist, which it doesn't seem like that was, way back, 25, 30 years ago. And I think together, I mean, we're unstoppable together. So we need to come together to help out this species of animal, this genre of animal.
Are you with us, Robert?
Reboot again?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, reboot.
Hello?
Yeah, try it one more time, Robert. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I am.
Jen,
Yeah.
is this a banger episode or what, man? This guy
This is amazing.
he is amazing, man. We got to get him back for 2.0 for sure.
Are you with us again? Hi.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted. I'm honored. And boy, did I learn a lot. I learned a lot. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I've learned a lot. And so we're like an hour and 42 minutes into this, Robert. We can go all day long. Let's save some. I know, you got a busy life. We all do. Thank you so much for coming on. Can you please tell the viewers, like, if they want to contact you or read, get your book and whatnot, where can you be found at?
I think he's freezing again. Can you hear us, Robert?
Okay. You can find me. The best place to get me is on Facebook. I'm there. And because so many of my colleagues and friends are on there, the messaging service is actually more useful to me than email. So come and look on Facebook. And if you want to buy this or any of my older books, they're available still on Amazon. And there's going to be a new one coming out. And with the help of people like Jen and Uncle Mike and so many others who have contributed things, you might not write the papers with this information, but I'm going to use your information and I'm going to give you the credit for it. I'm going to say, according to, I mean, absolutely. It's got to be a team effort or it's just.
It always does.
Dumb.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you
keep doing what you're doing, people like me are eating it up.
Yeah, right. Anybody who still has issues trying to find and contact Robert Sprackland, you can always reach out to me and Mike, and we'd be happy to connect you guys and stuff like that.
And so another selfish question from Uncle Mike. Robert, you going to come to Tinley or Reptile Talks or anywhere where I can meet you and shake your hand and actually give you a big hug?
Oh, well, if I have enough notice and I have enough in the bank at the time, I would love to. Traveling has been a little difficult, mainly for health reasons. This year, I'm fine. I'm past the health problems. I've been doing okay for a few months, and I am looking forward to being able to go. So just send me some dates so I can prepare ahead of time. Okay?
Sounds good. Well, here's an open date for you. If you're ever up in northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, you're welcome here. I got a beautiful spare bedroom for you and your dog and your wife. Come on down. We'll sit down here. We'll drink coffee and talk monitor lizards.
Same here. We'll probably have to share
one of my
monitors.
Yeah. But hey, Robert, thank you so much. And thank you for agreeing to come on. I hope you'll agree to come back for Robert Sprackland 2.0. You're a valuable guy in this thing that we all love. And thank you for all your hard work and dedication to these monitor lizards.
Yeah, thank you, Robert, for everything you do.
Because you find it useful, I keep doing it. So thank you, really. Thank you from here. Okay.
All right.
Take care, folks, and be good to your lizards.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robert.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on Trap Talk Reptile Network, the best reptile network in the world. Have a great weekend. Be good out there. Love your reptiles, and join us again. Not next Saturday, but the following Saturday. And peace out, dudes. Take care, everybody.
Bye now. Thank you all.